And I'd like to publicly apologize to Ariana Grande and, like, all of her fans because she's probably perfect casting for this movie.
No, she did it. She was
What an
she was
icon.
great in this.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Off to Broadway, the podcast where we deep dive into anything and everything musical theater. I'm Tara.
I'm Stefania.
And in today's episode, we said we weren't going to do this, but here we are doing this. And this is a fully dedicated episode to Wicked Part 1. Why are we here? Because everyone's talking about Wicked, and how can we not talk about Wicked?
I feel like there's a lot to say. I feel like I have a lot to say. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I've now seen this movie twice. You've seen it once. We will say the first time we saw it, we were the row behind the D box, which I don't recommend. And, you know, sometimes seeing a movie at a mall movie theater, like, the sound is just not what it should be.
It was pretty quiet, which we all noticed.
Based on what Jon Chu said, he said to, like, tell your movie theaters to bump it up to a 7. I'm like, can we not just bump it up to a 7, like, on its own? But maybe you can't. I don't really know how this stuff works.
I think it's, like, mixed for a sound level. If I had to guess, I don't know. I think it's, like, mixed for a sound level, but then each theater has its own sound level as well based on, like, audio bleed to other auditoriums, just, like, what the norm is. And so we were at a mall, and they're probably, like, close together, and then also you don't want the audio to be bleeding, like, all the way into the mall, so it might be a bit quieter there. Yeah. I realize I do take for granted that my, like, home movie theater is a very big, very good movie theater, and that's the one I grew up going to, so it never occurred to me that not all theaters had, you know, amazing projection, amazing sound, just, like, all the time, and this theater that we saw Wicked at for the first time was kind of not it.
Yeah.
In terms of sound and audio and visual.
It's actually funny because, like, we saw it, then I saw it, like, 4 days later, and then I saw a screening of Moana at the other really good theater in Toronto. And when I was, like, in the bathroom washing my hands, I could hear "What Is This Feeling" in the bathroom. So I was like, oh, their sound jacked up.
They turned it up.
But yeah, like, the theater that's close to Steph and the theater that's, like, right in the heart of downtown Toronto are, like, the two best theaters, I think, in, like, the GTA for anyone that lives here. And then, yeah, there's, like, unfortunately some, I don't know, I guess, like, a mall theater is just never really the moment.
It depends on the
Unless
movie.
You're seeing, like Moana too, so.
It depends on the movie, you know, for something like that's, like, a big spectacle like this, you do want to go to that. But if you're seeing a rom-com, I think Varsity and VIP's okay.
Oh, yeah, that's
I think
fine.
Yorkdale's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. Shout out to the movie theaters we go to, I guess, if you want to see us.
But with that, I don't even know, like, I ask? We've never done a Wicked episode either.
I know.
So this feels a little like sacrilege because we've never talked about the musical, like, exclusively. And now we're only going to talk about the first half in this episode. For anybody that's been living under a bubble, Wicked has been split into 2 movies. The first part just came out this year, and the second part, I think the date is November 21st, 2025. It's around American Thanksgiving, as was this first part release. And just off the top, there will be spoilers for Wicked in this episode. And potentially the Wizard of Oz, that's a 100-year-old movie, but, like, we will be spoiling aspects of that as well. And this cuts off where intermission happens in the musical, for anybody that doesn't know. What was so interesting to me, before we talk about, like, our relationship to Wizard of Oz, Wicked, whatever, is how many people I know that saw this movie that had no idea what this story was about. And I'm just like, where have you been?
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. No, I know. I do think we take for granted, you know, we recently spoke about the Lion King musical and how it is, like, one of the highest grossing pieces of entertainment, like, or if not the highest grossing piece of entertainment in the world, in history. And one of the other highest grossing pieces of entertainment is Wicked the Musical on Broadway. It has been running for 21 years at this point on Broadway. You know, never or rarely offering discounted tickets, being pretty much fully sold out.
I can tell you right now what
Please tell us.
Is happening.
Tell us. What's the capacity of that theater, if you know?
Oh, that I don't know. Maybe look that up as I'm going through. Oh, wait, sorry. I do know. That doesn't make sense. That's for the week. I don't know. Look it up.
Okay, I can look it up.
What I will say is we are recording this on December 8th, so this is the weekly grosses for last week, December 1st, which was just coming off of holiday. So keep that in mind, but also like it doesn't really change that much for Wicked. So Wicked, the week ending December 1st, their weekly gross was $2,930,221, which insane. Yes, they're almost pushing $3 million a week, which is crazy. Their average ticket price, which I think this is important, is $190, with their top ticket being $350, which means multiple people are paying $350 to sit in premium seats on at Wicked on Broadway. And I will say, that's crazy. These prices obviously have gone up, but Wicked was always like a top tier ticket price. When I saw it on Broadway, like, yes, we won the lottery one time, but like another time we paid full price for those tickets, or maybe they were like slightly discounted because it was pretty close to showtime. But like, it's never been a $50, and it will never be a $50. There's never been a rush. It's never been on TKTS. It's just one of those things. And they're selling they're at 100% capacity. But to look at like the previous week, which was pre-holiday, it was $2.5 million gross, average ticket of $166, with the top ticket being $350, and then 100% capacity. So they've been doing 100% capacity pretty consistently this entire year. Like, with a little, like, here and there, 97, 98, 99, they never, it seems, based on this list, when I'm looking at here, they have not dropped below, May 5th, 89 capacity.
Oh, okay.
79, February 11th. Damn. I don't think this will happen this year because of all of the movie buzz. But, like, they're pretty consistently in the 95 to 97 to 98 range for capacity.
And the craziest part about that is this is the biggest Broadway house on Broadway. This is the most seats, 1,933. So 1,933 seats. No theater has more seats than this. And they are basically selling out consistently for 21 years.
Yeah. We also talked about, I think,
so
in our
back to what we were saying, like, it's crazy that some people don't know what this is.
Right. That's the gist of
this
entire thing.
Has been touring for 20 years.
Yeah.
It's come to Toronto so many times. I've got 2 of my Toronto playbills from when I saw it here.
I have the most recent one from this year. But also, like, what year did that book come out?
Okay, so I also have, if we're going back to the beginning, I have the novel here. I've read about half of it. Okay, I brought it on vacation earlier this year, and I never finished it, so I gotta go on vacation again so I can finish this book. But I got past where the movie hits, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to compare. This book came out in 1995, written by Gregory Maguire. He was inspired by, obviously, the movie The Wizard of Oz, and also the original Frank L. Baum book, The Wizard of Oz, and wrote this, essentially, fan fiction novel for The Wizard of Oz. Which was then, I believe, optioned by Mark Platt to turn it into a movie. And then I think Stephen Schwartz went to him and was like, no, this is a musical. This sings. Right. And then they kind of created an extremely different story to make this musical out of. It's quite different from the book. They would like...
The book
what I would call,
isn't, like, PG, right?
No, what I would say they did was they, like, YA-ified the book to make the novel. It's definitely not PG, and I do think there are absolutely dark themes in the musical, but I think packaged in a way to make them like easy to understand and palatable. But I think there are things that are a bit darker in here that I do think get lost in translation when being transitioned to the musical. Maybe we'll talk about some of those later.
The fact that we're doing a full episode on the movie that we saw is something that, if you would have listened to us literally over the last 6 years, if you've been listening to us for almost the entirety of our podcast,
like life.
We've literally just said so many times, I'll believe it when I see it, and now we've seen it.
No, when we were sitting in that theater, I was like, can't believe.
But did we see it? Like,
was this real?
It's like a weird thing. But yeah, anyway, back to like that point of like the amount of people that I've spoken to that saw this movie and like learned about this story for the first time is just like so mind-blowing to me, because I'm like, not only has Wicked been around for as long as it's been around, but it's like broken into mainstream prior to this movie. Obviously what's happening right now is something I never thought we would see for a movie musical ever. But it's not like this was a little nothing show that no one ever saw. Like many people have seen this musical around the world. So it's just like funny to me and so interesting to me when I hear people's thoughts that don't know about the end of this story. They just know the halfway point right now.
There's a whole act 2 that ties much closer into the piece of material, the piece of media that people do know, The Wizard of Oz. And kind of runs parallel to it. Like, Act 1 kind of acts as a prequel, and you can almost forget that it is related to The Wizard of Oz at all. But Act 2 hews much closer to something that people know so well. And so, I'm very curious to hear about what these people think after seeing Part 2.
Like, we think that they're going to put Part 1 back in theaters next year, right?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. It's done really well right now. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, the like, we haven't even talked about the money aspect that they've made, but like, this is obviously like, it beat Grease as the highest like box office movie musical of all time. I just like cannot believe like the numbers that it's already recouped its like money for the first part of this movie.
Crazy.
And the budget was like 150 million, so they've like well surpassed.
Movie.
Yeah.
It's an expensive movie.
Okay, so
Tara, should you talk about like your relationship to Wicked prior to this?
I was going to say, like, my relationship to Wicked goes as far back as The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one of the first shows I've ever seen on stage. I went to, which is now Meridian Hall, at the time it was the Hummingbird Center, to see a production of The Wizard of Oz when I was 4. We've talked about this in, like, the show that changed it all in our first year of the podcast. Yeah, like, Wicked is the musical that did it for me. I saw it for the very first time in Toronto in 2005 with Stephanie J. Block, and I had seen maybe a couple of other things before, but like, this was the show that made me fall in love with musical theater. Like, this is the be all end all for me. No matter how stupid it is at times, no matter how much the script can like be a little messy, like, there's nothing that ever made me feel the way that this show made me feel in a theater, and like really like sent my love of musical theater like out into the world. I've seen Wicked 9 times now on stage, a few times here, a few times in New York, once in London. It's all the same production across the world. Sometimes there's accent, sometimes there's not. So
we need to find a non-replica production. I think that is
the Brazil one. I need to see it. So this is obviously a property that like means a lot to me. I also was in The Wizard of Oz as a kid. Like, I played Dorothy in school, like in a musical. So like, it's just been in my life for a very long time. So with all of that, you've heard me say it, like, I was very concerned about this movie. I don't even know, like, I don't even think are we going to properly rate this? We don't really rate movie musicals, do we?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. Maybe we should.
We will at the end. But
yeah.
I can't say that I walked out of that being like, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen, like the rest of the world. But like, I have moments that I loved, which we'll get into. But for you, what is your relationship to Wicked?
It's hard for me. I don't think I have that like super passionate relationship with Wicked the way that you do. I remember being probably at theater camp at age 10-ish, which would be about when Wicked came out, and hearing some of the songs on a mixtape that a camp counselor made to play at camp. And I'd heard some of the songs, but hadn't like sought them out myself. And then I remember I was at a dance studio, and we were and one of the duets that some of the younger girls were doing was "What Is This Feeling?" And that was kind of the first time I really heard the full thing. They painted like a 10-year-old girl green.
Oh my God.
On stage. I'm like, poor girl. Oh my God. All of this. And they did like a musical theater duet to it. And then probably, here's my Broadway playbill. This is the playbill from when I saw it on Broadway the first time. I'd heard the music a little bit, but I didn't know it super well. And this is 2012. I think we paid resale prices, gotta be honest.
Wow.
And we sat in the last row of the balcony, probably a little bit off to the side. My whole family, my family of 4, and I would have been 2012, like 18 years old, 18ish. And
that's kind of like remember, a prime age to see that.
No, it is a prime age. You're like a very similar age to the characters at that time. They're like entering university. I think I was like maybe going into my second year of university, something like that. And I just remember like the Wizard of I'll open it up, my first Elphaba, Jackie Burns, an iconic first Elphaba, I think.
What an icon.
I know, in my Glinda, Chandra Schwartz. There they are. Beautiful. And I just remember Elphaba started singing The Wizard and I was crying because I was like, okay, wow, this is a beautiful I Want song. But I was also like, to be an actress, to getting to sing this song every night, like what a gift of a song that is. And then when she, flies at the end of Act 1, I was like, oh my God, she's flying. I actually went in with like a lot less information than I usually go into a show with in an insane way. And after that, I went to the cast recording. I do think that was, like, for me, Wicked is a show that benefited from seeing the production before, like, falling in love with the cast recording. And then I've seen it a couple more times. I do enjoy it. I do listen to the cast recording. I think there are some songs and, like, some lyrics and like, characterizations that are so, so wonderful. But, yeah, it is a flawed show for sure as well. But,
yeah,
it is almost, like, kind of just the time it came out and when I saw it is just kind of, like, quintessential Broadway, quintessential like modern Broadway, quintessential modern musical theater in an amazing way.
And I think like we talked about this year specifically when we did that episode on the Tony Awards, the 2004 Tonys. Obviously it didn't do as well like awards wise as everybody thought that it was going to.
Well, it didn't get great reviews.
No, it didn't.
It did not get very good reviews.
Yeah. That was the one that we in the doc. What was that doc called again?
Oh my God. Was it like Road to Broadway or something like that?
Something like that, but it was like, could we get a woman critic up in here? Because like these men hate these two witches and why?
Yeah, no, definitely the critics that they had did not understand the impact it was having on the intended audience. I don't even know if that was their intended audience, but it ended up being the primary audience of this show. And you never underestimate what a teen girl is passionate about. Never underestimate what a woman aged 10 to 25 feels very strongly about.
No, it's so true. Okay, so before we actually like talk about this in general, I don't think we've ever actually talked about this like in depth here, but like what are your thoughts on like the split of this movie being 2 parts in general?
So generally I think it's fine. I do think in some cases where this has previously happened, hypothetically, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Hunger Games, Mockingjay, Part 1 and 2, Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn, Part 1 and 2, like, there's not a lot there, but I do think there is enough there, specifically in Act 1, to split it in half. Was this movie slightly overlong? Yes. I do think it could have been condensed a little bit.
Like, this movie was 2 hours and 40 minutes, and the entire musical was 2 hours and 40 minutes.
No, I know.
So that's just to give a...
And I, like, this is the thing about Wicked. I do think Act 1 is stronger than Act 2. So I'm not surprised, let's say, that this movie kind of stayed, so loyal to the musical. They expanded on many things. I honestly don't have a problem with them splitting it into Part 1 and Part 2. I think it had a really strong ending. And I think because even there's a time jump between Acts 1 and 2, and I think the 2 parts will be a bit different tonally, and I do think you can watch this movie as a standalone. And I do think they did things in this movie to make the ending feel like an ending, which I can also like critique, but they did kind of try to make it in some ways feel like a complete story.
Well, it's interesting because I was talking to someone at work who, one of these people had never seen, never read a synopsis, like did not know anything about Wicked, and I asked, did this feel like a complete movie? And he said, for one of them. And I was like, oh, okay, so that's interesting. It feels like, to him, it felt like a complete story for Elphaba, but that there was much more to learn about Glinda. And I was like, oh, okay, so I wouldn't say that this is left on a cliffhanger because, again, if anyone's seen the musical, it ends at Defying Gravity, which is the act break. Like, that is so obviously what they were going to do. So that's not, like, a shock to anybody. I agree with you that, like, they've expanded, but also at the same time, they didn't. Because they kind of just gave, like, Easter eggs of what I think will be more discussed in Act 2 because...
Not Easter eggs, Tara.
Not
it's
Easter eggs,
foreshadowing.
That's
foreshadowing.
What I meant, yes. They've dropped little hints of what's going to happen in the next part, I think. Because, like, if we're going to break this down timing-wise, like, Act 2 is, like, 50 minutes. So they have to make this... I don't know the runtime. We don't know the runtime as of right now what Wicked Part 2 is.
We do know that there are 2 additional songs.
Which makes sense because, like... Yeah. Not a lot happens in the second half, but also so much happens because, as you said at the beginning, like, we have to go through that Wizard of Oz story that everybody knows and loves. So that will be interesting to me. I obviously think we're going to get more about the animals because they've really, like, hinted at a lot of animal stuff in the first part, but then, like, kind of left us hanging with no answers. So I think we'll get a lot more of that. I think we'll get a lot more of, like, the wizard. And obviously, like, part 2 to me is, like, more Glinda based. However, like, she was the star to me in this movie, so it's like it's very interesting the way that they have done the split. I also think it's great that Winnie Holtzman, who worked on the musical, was very heavily involved in the story of the movies. I just am like, I mean, we haven't done it, and I don't know if we'll do it in a long time, but, like, imagine seeing the musical now that we've seen what we've seen. Like, I feel like there's so many things that
I know
are now missing.
I know people who did, you know, not personally, but I've seen online people who saw a matinee of the movie and then went to see the musical at night. That's just to, you know,
the dream.
a dream day. It definitely, you know, and in a way that movies can, because, you know, you do have actors unions, but you don't have to get people in and out in time to catch a train home for the most part. You know, you can kind of linger on certain scenes and do a close-up and let someone sit in an emotion in a way that in, like, a bit of a fast-paced musical you don't really have the opportunity to do.
Yes and no, because I actually think the musical does a better job of what you're talking about than the movie does.
Really?
Yeah.
I do. I don't necessarily know if the movie does, like, an amazing job with all these things, but they are trying to do these things, you know?
They're trying to expand these characters that, like, we know in a certain light. They're trying to give them more, like, backstory, but also I felt like it was lacking backstory, but that's, I think, like, maybe my, like, well, I have, like, a few main critiques, but the backstory element of it, I feel like we didn't quite dive deep enough into, even though this movie is, like, an hour longer than the first half of the musical.
Well, yeah, I think, like, let's just get into it. Like, what were your initial reactions after we saw it for the first time?
Like, don't get me wrong, I was heavily crying at multiple moments of this movie, but I believe I said, like, I loved it but also hated it, but then I saw it again in IMAX and I really, like, the hate left and I just enjoyed it. However, like, there are certain things that I, like, cannot get past. Actually, I guess I'll just, like, bring this up right now.
Yes,
This is, like, very controversial of me because everybody online is saying this separately. We'll talk about, like, casting, like, for real in a little bit. But I just want to say that I do not like the amount of riffs that are in this movie. It really bothers me how stylized they tried to make, I was going to say Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, but Glinda and Elphaba. Because those are the moments that it takes me out and I'm like, oh, that's Cynthia riffing. I'm not that girl. That's Ariana giving us a weird modulation in Popular. Like, I don't see the character anymore. I just see these two women who performed at the 25th anniversary concert live on my TV screen. Like, that's what it felt to me. Like, everyone is ranking the riffs on TikTok right now, and I'm just like, the I'm Not That Girl riff is the worst one to me. Like, I cannot stand how much I'm like, oh my god, that's Cynthia Erivo sounding so amazing, but that's only Cynthia Erivo. Like, I really feel like they should have stuck to, like, the true melodies written on the paper.
I think This is a you problem.
It is a me problem for sure.
Yeah. No, not because other people are disagreeing, but more because I think, the reason I think why the first viewing was like, do I hate this? And wanting to, is because like there is such a strong attachment to that original cast album, to the
100%.
seeing an original, and I do think it's hard to see them deviate from that in any way, and not necessarily disagreeing or agreeing or whatever, but I do think like it was never going to be the exact same. They were always going to want to do it differently with the expansion of 20 years later. Yes. And also like with what they were bringing to the role with their own voices, which is different than what an original cast is going to bring to it.
Like, yes, I agree with you, but also Ariana Grande is going around in every interview talking about how important it was to her to keep as pure to the cast recording as possible. I'm like, girl, you didn't do that. Like, there are moments in Popular where I'm like, oh, the pop star is coming out, and like, it does not fit the music to me. So
I do think, like, for Popular specifically, like that ending section where she does like the modulation.
That's not what bothers me.
Really?
No, that is like okay to me. There's like a specific moment, I can't do it, but I will insert a clip of it where I'm just like, oh, we've literally dropped the character and now the pop star is here. And I just like did not like that. I also feel the same way about The Wizard and I. Like The Wizard and I, my favorite song, like maybe in this entire musical, was like not my favorite in this movie at all.
So when we saw the movie, what I found, and I think I find this with Cynthia's voice generally, when she is like belting, I'm like, this is the greatest singer to ever live.
Yes.
When she is singing kind of a bit softer, I don't always like love how she sounds, which like that first part of Wizard and I is a lot like talking, singing, almost like building up. And I was like, oh, I don't like love how this sounds. But when she kicked it into the next gear for that second half, I'm like, okay, you're fantastic. You sound fantastic. And so I think that's just like, again, like a personal taste, like with her voice.
It's just funny to me because like from knowing what I know about Wicked, like you cannot add riffs. So it's crazy to me that like the movie was like anything goes, guys. Give it.
They definitely want people who, have listened to that cast recording 100 times come to see the musical on stage and feel like they're getting that product that they've been sold. And I think they probably felt in the movie they had more freedom to kind of redefine because this will be the first experience for so many people. And I also know like Stephen Schwartz and Stephen Aremus and, Winnie Holtzman, who worked on the original Broadway musical, like all worked on the music as well. So, it was with kind of the original's approval to kind of add those things.
100%. I think it is exactly what you're saying. Like, it's just very jarring for me who's listened to a cast recording for 20 years to hear something sound different. And I love when we get, like, individuality from all of the Elphibas and Galindas. I just think what bothered me most is that it felt like we were getting, like, the human people instead of, like, the characters. Which, like, is that a major critique? No, in the grand scheme of things, that's, like, very small. But, like, the vocal choices, I think, are just something that, like, I don't know what I'm gonna... Because some of the, like, best, biggest moments are in part 2. So I'm, like, so curious what, like, that stuff... Like, what's No Good Deed gonna sound like? What's Thank Goodness gonna sound like? Those are the two that, like... What's For Good gonna sound like? Because if that's not what I want it to be, I will be upset about that. But all that to say, like, I love what they did with the reorchestrations. I think some of them are so good. The No One Mourns the Wicked right off the top, like, including the motifs of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead is, like, so good right off the top there. Yeah. It's funny because, like, we watched...
like, a little, like, For Good orchestrations.
Like, that was a personal attack on me every single time. Yeah. Like, every time that they did that. Yes. One of the best...
Is it true you were her friend?
Yes. Like, attack. That was an attack. The Ozfest Ballroom, which I think we will give a full, like, moment to that soon, but, like, that new orchestration, so beautiful. Like, the way that... I actually don't...
And it's a bonus track on the soundtrack. It's a little bonus track on the soundtrack.
And it's
like,
so
when they dance
beautiful.
Together.
It's a really beautiful orchestration. I do think a lot of stuff does sound more, like... 2024 than obviously the musical does. We're hearing a bit more like synthesizer to certain things, which
I also
is interesting.
and you've seen the movie twice,
yeah,
and I've seen it once, and I think we talked about this, the soundtrack sounds different than the takes they used in the movie.
I agree. And also, I read yesterday, the day before, they're releasing another soundtrack that doesn't have, like, the dialogue.
Like the audio. Yeah, I'm just, like, certain songs
that's going to sound like, too. I also wanted to preface, I wonder
if they're going to try and, like, radio single these things.
Oh, God.
Like, Wizard and I radio single. Now, I'm serious. Like, taking the morable dialogue out of the front and just, like, Cynthia singing.
Good, get rid of it. But
Michelle Yeoh.
I do want to say what I was saying about the riffs for Cynthia and Ariana. I actually felt the complete opposite for Jonathan Bailey. So
he sounded great. No, we were worried about him. We were really worried about him as you know, the number one Jonathan Bailey podcast.
Maybe because like Fiyero is so much of a stylized part, it worked better for me. I think he sounds phenomenal. I actually think like if we're gonna talk about maybe the best character in this entire movie, it could be Jonathan Bailey.
Well, I do think. Like, we got to expand him a lot more in the movie than the musical allows him to.
Saying anything, just by looks.
No, we meet him for the first time in a different way in the movie, which I think
sets up. Which I think later, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it also we meet kind of, let's say, in that first meeting, you know, he's not surrounded by people. He's not kind of putting up these like walls and this, you know, performance that he does when he arrives at the school. So you know, like, the behind the him before you get to know the him.
Actually, while we're here, also, sorry, I feel like we're, like, jumping all over the place. But
No, we're just chatting.
How we always are. But with that, two things in that scene specifically, he obviously doesn't notice that Elpha's green right off the top, which is a chef's kiss moment for that character. Not so dumb after all. And then two, he has a talking horse. So he also
even doesn't notice or, like, doesn't care or like doesn't
he doesn't care.
Yeah.
But his horse talks, so he also obviously has like a soft spot for the animals, which like not everybody does.
Did you know his horse is blue?
Yes, I did know. Yeah.
I saw a clip of them painting it. I was like, this horse was blue?
Yes. But maybe that was like because the look of that forest was so blue they wanted the horse to like blend in. Okay, let's actually go back and talk a little bit about the cast, because I think since the casting was released, we've like kind of talked about it here and there on different episodes of this podcast. I think if you would cut back to like maybe 2 years ago, there was probably a clip of me saying that I thought it was like bad casting to have Ariana Grande.
We were not feeling it.
And I'd like to publicly apologize to Ariana Grande and like all of her fans, because she's probably perfect casting for this movie.
No, she did. She was.
What an icon.
Great in this. Yeah, and like you were saying, like she did. I feel really want to respect. Like she is a lover of Wicked. Like from when she saw it with the original cast. There's the lore of her meeting Kristen backstage, getting the wand. All these things make me laugh. Be like, oh, Ariana grew up like. Rich.
Yes, I know. Every time she says stuff and she's like, yeah, we grew up in Florida. But then I'm like, but you went to like multiple Broadway performances and like...
And they bought the auction to like meet and like she as a child was bidding. And I'm just like, okay, you rich. But like, good for you, girl. Happy for you. Yeah, no, we were very wary of Ariana's casting. And, both her and Cynthia, we were kind of like, this is really, are we too old for these parts? How old are these characters supposed to be? What kind of energy are we giving? I think they kind of solved that by just having everyone kind of look around the same age and then just kind of like let it go. Yeah. Which is, I think, what you have to do. Like, if you have your main characters, then you cast your extras and all your supporting cast to kind of support the look that you're going for with them. Like, you work outside from there. So it didn't end up being the issue at all. And then in the next movie, they're older anyway, so whatever. Yeah. But yeah, Ariana turned out like a comedic tour de force performance in this movie. And like, as of
today, like, people are talking about awards for her, and like they mean it. Like, I'm sorry, every time I see an article that says like Wicked is going to win Best Picture, I'm like, this is a joke. Like, everybody calm down. Whenever this episode is coming out, the Golden Globe nominations have like just happened, or they're happening today, and I do think that like Wicked is obviously like going to get many, because
this is a Golden Globes movie.
It splits the category from drama to musical, blah blah blah. But like, I just am like flabbergasted anytime I see like Ariana Grande in conversation for like Best Supporting Actress at the Oscars.
Like the front runner, as people say.
I know. And sure. Don't get me wrong, like, I thought she was incredible in this movie. I could not, like, seeing her do this, I cannot picture anybody else do what she did. I think she did exactly what we all wanted.
Sorry to Taylor Louderman, okay? Sorry
to Dove Cameron. Sorry to Renee Rapp was so wrong for this. Like, I don't even know what we were doing there.
Sorry to whoever Cynthia auditioned with that she said wasn't very good.
Yeah, I mean, Cynthia's, like, pre-press tour was a wild time, and the press tour has always been crazy. But I think Ariana did what she said she was going to do, which was, like, take care of this character. And, like, singing aside, obviously everyone knows about her as a singer, but, like, that girl can act. Like, she steals every scene that she's in this movie. And for a part one that's, like, really about Elphaba, like, I could not take my eyes off of her. So that's a real, I think, testament to her acting in this movie.
It is also definitely a more showy performance in that she's getting to be silly. She's definitely delivering more comedic one-liners. She's getting to be over the top in a way that Elphaba kind of has to be the straight man to her comedy all the time. And so, not that it's not fair, but, you know, it's hard not to be looking towards Glinda, who's in over-the-top clothing, over-the-top lines, over-the-top physicality, towards a character who's very, like, kind of internal and more serious, and it's hard not to just, like, look past and, like, focus entirely on the girl in pink, you know?
Yeah. I will say for me specifically, and I don't know how you feel about Cynthia's performance, but I think the second half of the movie is where she, like, really shines for me. When she is at the Emerald City and she realizes that she can read the Grimoire, and then she also realizes that, literally so spoiler heavy right now, but, like, that the wizard has absolutely no power. You can, like, see how scared she is about that, but also, like, I don't know, like, I just think her acting in those moments all the way to, like, Defying Gravity, which we all have thoughts on, is, like, really acted so well. She gives so much power to the small moments, which I've never seen an Elphaba do before on stage. So, but that's also, like, helpful with the close-up cameras and, like, that's where you get really that from her.
See her worldview kind of being shattered in that kind of last half hour of the movie, realizing, you know, that Madame Morrible, the wizard, have all been kind of using her or plan to use her for their own means. And kind of the acting throughout that with, like, the benefit of having that 2 hour, 45-minute runtime, kind of getting to see all the realizations happening in real time, like, on her face, I think is a real benefit to her performance. And I do think, you know, I think part 2, where, you know, she gets to sing these much more explosive songs, you know, Defying Gravity was a taste of what's to come, let's say, in something like No Good Deed, where Elphaba comes into her full power. I think those will be probably Cynthia's, like, biggest showcase moments.
It's very interesting because, again, like, I've seen this on stage many times, but to watch that character finally get accepted by everybody, celebrated, and then for that to all be, like, stripped away within, like, 24 hours, I've never seen, like, the devastation on that character before. Now, it's interesting, again, for the people that, like, do not know the story, do not know the musical, do not know any of it, the number one question that everyone is asking me is, like, how does she get so wicked? Because obviously the Wicked Witch of the West and the Wizard of Oz is, like, the meanest. She is so scary. she is wicked. But is that just one perspective of her, you know? Right. I think that's what this is purporting. It's like, you only see one side of the story. Okay, here's this other side. I just don't think we'll ever see her get that mean.
No.
Because we never see her get that mean in the musical, so I just don't think that it's ever gonna happen. But it will be interesting to see with, like, the cameras that they can show us, like, how, not, like, evil, but how evil she can get. Like, it will be interesting to see that.
The movie's already made at this point, but I think what could be really interesting part 2 is to maybe see the same scenes from different characters' perspectives. Like, I don't know if we're getting Dorothy in the next movie.
I think we are.
I know. I also think we are getting a bit of Dorothy. The way Jon Chu's been kind of cagey about it, especially because we got that glimpse of her right at the beginning of the movie.
Top, yeah.
I do think, okay, if we go through Dorothy's eyes and kind of see her experience of the Wicked Witch of the West, and then if we loop back around and then kind of get to see Elphaba's thought process and why she's doing what she's doing at the same time, and kind of, I think that would be a really, one that could kind of justify a 2-hour plus runtime, but also kind of be, back to the thesis statement of this show, like, who is wicked? What does it mean to be wicked?
Yeah. Is
anyone fully wicked? And I think what the show is trying to say is, like, no one is 100% one thing or 100% another thing, and, like, what you see might not always be, what the actuality is. And I think if we got to see these, like, different perspectives of the same scene or scenario, I think that could be a really, really interesting way of exploring kind of how did this Wicked Witch get the reputation that she did.
Yeah, because if we're going to talk about, like, the most evil character in the show, it is Nessa Rose. So, like, let's...
Wow, a take. I would say probably, okay, like...
I think it's, like, Madame Morrible, obviously.
I think it's, like, Madame Morrible. That would be my take, Madame Morrible. Like,
Nessa...
The Wizard also, not to say the Wizard, but the Wizard's kind of just, like, a dumb idiot.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas, like, Madame Morrible, to me, feels more calculated than...
Oh, yeah.
And Nessa Rose...
Well, she gets really, like... In the musical, she gets very evil, like, in part 2. It's funny, because, again, like, the majority of the people that do not know the story were just like, what a waste of a character. And I'm like, you guys don't even know what happens.
It's all coming around. Speaking of, let's say, Wicked. The life and times of the Wicked Witch of the West... Nessa Rose is a really interesting character to me in this. She almost is like a religious fundamentalist that no one likes when they're at school. And everyone kind of finds her pretty unpleasant to be around, and very much like feels like she's better than everyone. Like,
this is a dumb
like
question.
Glinda way.
But is she in a wheelchair in the book?
Yes.
Okay, she is.
Yes. Not in a Glinda way feels like she's better than everyone, but more in a, like, I'm more knowledgeable, or like I know, not even just, she has these beliefs and feels like she just, like, is behaving, I don't know how to explain it really, but really she's giving religious fundamentalist in this book, and I think, like, that's much closer to almost how she is portrayed in Act 2.
Yes. Like, for people that don't know the time jump, like, their dad dies, who was the governor of Munchkinland. She becomes the governor of Munchkinland. She, like, strips the Munchkins of their, like...
She, like, gets really power hungry.
Everything. And then, like, Bach becomes her servant, basically. And then the Wizard of Oz happens, and she, R.I.P., gets killed by the house.
Yeah, like, who is she? I know, people are like, and what is she here for? And it's like, well, if you remember the Wizard of Oz... The Wicked Witch of the West famously has a sister. What happens to her?
Like, literally, not a single person is able to put this together, and it blows my mind every time. And it's just like...
Like, if we've seen this very famous movie, what is the inciting incident of the action?
I watched in real time someone figure this out, and they were like, oh my god, that's her feet under the house? And I was like, yes.
Yeah, like, we've been obsessed with... I think the thing is, because the slippers are not red...
That's because they do not have the rights.
Yes, it's a full rights issue, for sure. But because the slippers are not red, that connection is not being made for some people.
Like, for the majority.
No, I know. But it's just like, famously, she has a sister. What happens to her sister?
I think also because, like, in this movie, we don't really spell out, like, that Elphaba is the Wicked Witch of the West. We spell that out more in the second movie. So maybe that too. Like, we're not talking about that, like,
turn to the western skies.
100%. But we're not like, oh, Glinda's from the north, Nessa's from the east. Like, we don't do that the way like the Wizard of Oz does that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's so before they get to those points.
That. And then just to, like, go through the rest, obviously, like, Michelle Yeoh giving exactly what I expected her to give in this role.
A lot of people don't like her. I actually like her in this.
I like her in this. I don't like her talk singing in this, but that's
no. She's not a good singer. She's not a good singer, and I think that's fine. Like, am I being like, I gotta hear that Michelle Yeoh on that cast album? No. But there is this, Michelle Yeoh is such, like, a regal, like, person, and she just, like, brings this authority, and you can understand why like, with just seeing her, why Elphaba would be, like, so honored to be taught by her. Like, you see her and you're like, oh, she knows about magic, you know, you understand why this is a character that, like, gains the respect of the students so quickly, and even gains Elphaba's respect pretty quickly.
Yeah.
To me. I know a lot of people don't like her. I liked her in this.
Yeah. Jeff Goldblum playing himself as usual.
He would be my critique, let's say. I don't know.
Oh, really?
I wanted something different.
I thought he was good. It's exactly what I expected, which is kind of like what the wizard is. Dumb. Like, he's just dumb.
I know. I don't know. Jeff Goldblum, he's fine to me. I don't know. I don't know what I wanted, but not necessarily that.
Yeah. Peter Dinklage as Dr. Dillamond literally could have been played by anybody.
Who?
And, like,
Where?
I don't even think actually, I did see a picture of him with the cast the other day.
I saw him
like,
at a
wow, he's seen the movie.
He's
Can't
there.
believe it. But he wasn't even on set with them. Like, I watched the, like, NBC Wicked, like, behind the whatever that they did recently. And they, like, acted to, like, another person there. And I don't even think they, like, heard him speak.
I believe it was a woman who played
Yes.
Dr. Dillamond on set, because I'm a big Bowen Yang fan, listen to his podcast every week, and he's given some tidbits over the past couple years about just, like, filming the movie. And, you know, there was a big scandal almost when he says, oh, I love whatever her name is playing Dr. Dillamond, and people are like, Dr. Dillamond's being a woman. He's like, no, she's operating the tennis balls that we're acting towards. Like, she's not actually playing Dillamond.
The voice.
I do think the voice performance came much later than the actual filming of the movie. Like, I don't know.
It was probably like
they met before.
It was probably like an ADR situation.
Yeah. Once they knew exactly what they needed, they brought him in.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of Bowen, like, truly a star.
My fave. We need a pastry. Enroll here often.
I don't think he's gonna be very big in the second part, though, because, like, we're not really at shiz anymore in part two.
I agree. I do wonder what we're doing with Fanny and Shen Shen in movie 2.
Well, Shen Shen barely said anything. Fanny said much more.
No, Fanny really stole the show from Fanny and Shen Shen.
Yeah.
Apparently, like, okay, so have you heard that in the original workshop of Wicked, Fanny was played by Sutton Foster?
Yes.
And there is, I think, like, a Fanny track in the musical, but they don't really do anything. There's also a Shen Shen track that is apparently usually, like, the Morrible understudy.
Interesting.
But, like, these characters are just listed as ensemble in the program. They're not listed as, like, Fanny and Shen Shen, but they are Fanny and Shen Shen. And Fanny's also usually a girl on stage, typically.
Yeah.
Just, you know, facts here. Do we discuss Ethan Slater?
I was going to say, our next two side characters who go together, like Nessa, who we've talked about. I don't think, like, Marissa Bodie had that much to do in this movie, so, like, I'll speak to her when I see her in the next movie, I think, because she has a much bigger part.
My favorite star of the movie, actually, young Nessa Rose. I'm obsessed with her.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm obsessed with her. I have watched that clip of her being like, so many times. I've stalked her Instagram, run by her mother, so much. She's so cute. The little outfit, her hair.
Yeah, so cute. Ethan Slater, like, he was great in this, but again, like, not much to do.
Not a lot to do.
He will have much more to do in the second half of this movie. So that will be interesting. But, like, when he did sing, he sounded great. He always sounds great. I really enjoyed the, like, Easter eggy Wizard of Oz, like, dance, like, choreography stuff that he was doing. There's a moment, I like that we haven't, like, we've talked about Nessa, but we haven't talked about, like, the two other big things that happen here. But, like, there's a moment when, I think it's when he's meeting Glinda for the first time, he, like, kind of falls over, but then he picks himself up, very similar to how the Tin Man does it in The Wizard of Oz, which I appreciated every Easter egg of The Wizard of Oz in this movie. I thought it was, like, some of them were really thought out. And then, like, similarly, Jonathan Bailey has many choreography moments that, like, really look similar to the Scarecrow dancing in, like, If I Only Had a Brain in The Wizard of Oz. We already talked about him, but Jonathan Bailey, like, such a star in this movie. I think he will be a character that will become really interesting to me in the second part, because I do think they will bump him out even further. Yeah. especially because like his character change happens in that second movie as well.
And also he was kind of not the star, but people came out of this movie like loving him as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they're edited already, but people were like, "Oh, Jonathan Bailey, a star." Like, yes, we knew, but also, you know, proven again and again. And this is kind of his first like major studio movie.
This is huge, and like he was doing two other projects at the same time, so crazy. Who are we missing here? Anybody?
Who are we missing here?
I think that's like basically the main people. Let's talk about like music and like numbers that we liked maybe more or less in the movie than on stage, and then also just like any kind of scenes that like worked better for you like in this medium than the musical. Are there any like standout songs for you in this movie that felt different?
So I don't know if it felt different to me, but my, I think, favorite translation was the opening "No One Mourns the Wicked," kind of, you know, the end of the story before we jump to the past. You know, I've heard that song a million times, and I understand that, you know, we're singing these lyrics and we're not necessarily talking about the Wicked Witch, but I really felt what Ariana was doing and the way that they had those close-ups on her and just the way that they staged the scene. You, especially for someone who is familiar with Wicked, you know, the performance that she was giving was really enhancing that song, being like, we're singing those words and everyone is singing about the Wicked Witch, but Glinda is like, no, you're singing about me, like the wicked die alone. That is me, that is not her. Like, I am not the one alone. Or like, I am the one alone, she's not. But Glinda doesn't even know. But
I was gonna say,
I really, like she doesn't even know.
She has no idea. Like, to me, like that moment when she throws the fire onto the like broom statue of Elphaba.
Yeah. There's like effigy.
So like devastating because she does not want to do that, but also she is this person who represents everybody in Oz at this moment, and if she doesn't, then like she's public enemy number one. So she is being like complicit to
what everyone is. This is like maybe a tangent, but maybe not. It kind of reminded me, this musical generally, and like Glinda specifically, maybe reminds me of, we just saw Cabaret in New York pretty recently, and many of the characters in Cabaret kind of choose to take the easier path of least resistance in a hope that it will protect them from what is to come in the country. And to be fair, like, not that they didn't know, like, but you don't really know, and you're acting in self-preservation in so many ways. And I think Glinda has always, you know, wanted to be, you know, she is popular, but wanted to be popular, loved, revered, and it is so much easier for her to continue to do that than to stand up for anything. And then that scene, which is right at the beginning and then kind of comes back around at the end, is the consequences of her not standing up for what she believes and taking the easiest path and, you know, having everything she ever wanted, but it feeling very hollow in that moment. And I think it acts well as an opening scene for someone who doesn't know, because it references kind of the ending of a very famous movie that this is kind of inspired by, but also for someone who does have that additional context of what is, like, what is actually happening. It feels like very deep, very resonant, and I think like they did a great job staging it, and like I think her performance really, really nails it in that moment.
It
also that's probably like my favorite scene. It
also feels like this, now to jump all the way to the end, but when Elphaba does fly and Madame Morble hugs Glinda, someone that has hated her the entirety since she met her, how easily she falls into that. Of like, because it's what she's just like desperate for her respect, approval, this whole movie. Yeah. So it's like, and I love her, but like I love this more, and it's like Glinda is such a complex and interesting and beautiful character. Obviously, like Elphaba is too, but her story is more like, I don't know. There's like points along the way that she hits all the way through, whereas like Glinda like veers off at all of these different paths, and she's very complex. Like, she's very lonely, even though she presents that she's absolutely not. But even that scene, like right before they go to Oz, when Fiyero comes in, she's like, I can't get through to him. Like, she's like, but you have everything you want. She's like, I don't care. I want him. Like there are certain things that she focuses on, and it's like, oh, I'm still not good enough. So very interesting. I agree. They did such a great job there. I think for me, like, there are two scenes that like really stand out. They're not even like musical numbers. Well, one of them half is. The scene when everybody is like friends again, post-popular, and they're in the classroom when Dr. Dillamond is like taken away. I absolutely loved the new addition that they did for the movie of using poppies. I thought it was such an incredible callback to The Wizard of Oz when they all fall asleep in the poppy field. Basically, for anyone that doesn't know about this scene, like, the animals are no longer allowed to work because animals should be seen, not heard. And they like very angrily like escort Dr. Dillamond, and like very like it's a bad scene. They take him away and they replace him with like this other teacher, and then they show off this like lion cub in the cage, and the cub is scared, and Elphaba like uses her powers to help out the cub. I think in the musical she just does something similar to what she does in that first scene, is like people's chairs go flying in the air, everyone gets distracted, and her and Fiyero like run away. But to use the like symbol of the poppy to have everybody fall asleep, I thought was like a really, really smart addition. She also talks about how poppies are like her favorite flower all the way through, which I think is really smart.
Something interesting, and like, I don't know if you were seeing this, but so in The Wizard of Oz, when everyone falls asleep from the poppies, the Scarecrow and the Tin Man are both immune because they are not human. And everyone's like, oh, this is why Fiyero didn't fall asleep. And I was like, okay, but Bach is over here, like...
sleeping.
dead asleep. So I don't know, I don't know, would it have been interesting to kind of keep that consistent? I don't know. Maybe not. But you don't want Bach there. So.
Yeah, there also is that line from Fiyero that's like, what did you do and why didn't you do it to me?
Why didn't you do it to me? Yeah.
But that is interesting.
I don't know.
It would have been interesting.
Like, oh, it's the parallel. Okay, it's like, well, what's happening with Bach then?
It would have been interesting if like they left and he was maybe like head down on the table but like still awake.
Like
that
pretending or something.
Kind of cool. Yeah. That could have been cool. Sorry, this movie was shot 3 years ago, and here we are with like suggestions for how to.
Well, I don't know. We've got takes. Maybe in part 2 he'll be revealed. He'll be like, I was pretending to sleep.
But my absolute favorite scene in the entire movie, I literally could cry talking about it right now, is the Ozdust ballroom scene. Again, I've seen this scene on stage 9 times. I've never felt the emotions that I felt the way that they did it in this movie. Again, for people that don't know, in Popular, Glinda gets this like ugly hat that is the iconic.
No,
like,
before. No, Popular's after.
Right before. Yes, before during Dancing Through Life, Glinda her friends find this like ugly hat that is the Wicked Witch hat, and they say there's nobody that you hate enough to, or she says there's no one I hate enough to give this to. Yes, you do. Let's give it to Elphaba and invite her to the Ozdust party tonight. Whatever. So then we end up at the ballroom. She comes in, and you can see that she's already, like, deeply uncomfortable. Everybody is staring at her, and she does this, like, funny dance. And I think on stage it reads more of a, like, comedic moment than it does in the movie.
It's almost, like, very tragic in the movie when she starts dancing.
Like,
it's so upsetting.
You heard me. Like,
Tara was sniffling.
I was, like, heavily crying during this moment. I've never, like, felt this way about this scene ever. They're also, like, freaking underscoring for good, like, in the background. Like, how dare you?
That's their friendship theme. That's the Elphaba Glinda's theme.
But it's that, like, iconic line from Fiyero of, like, she doesn't give a twig what people think about her. Glinda says, of course she does, and then she joins her. But what got me was, I mean, it wasn't even acted from what we've learned now. But they do this dance together, and there's, like, this beautiful close-up on Cynthia, and she is crying. Like, she is so, like... emotional. I literally cannot even speak right now about this moment. And it's like Ariana Grande just puts her hand on her face and you see her mouth. It's okay. And I lost it. It was so beautiful to me. And I think that like brings around what I love so much about this story is that like it's friendship at the end of the day. Like, damn, this stupid movie. But like I cannot listen to the Ozdust Ballroom like instrumental without tearing up when I see it. It's so beautiful. Anyway.
This, like... No, I'm with you on this. Dancing Through Life is one of my favorite sequences from the musical itself. I just feel like they are packing so much story so cleverly into, 10 minutes, basically, of stage time. You kind of, in that... On
including
the stage,
lyrics. They're in packing so many, like, important lyrics that come up later.
You're meeting in the musical, you like basically meet Fiyero, like get to this that he's like, we're going dancing, you set up the kind of like Glinda, Nessa Rose, Bach situation, you're setting up the hat situation, you're then getting to the Oz's ballroom, you're doing this, this is the turning point for Glinda, like having regrets about how she's treated Elphaba. Them, and by the end of the song, they're best friends. Like, you enter this song, they cannot stand each other, you end this song, and they're best friends, and it feels earned. So I really think it's such an effective musical theater storytelling moment. And then what they really did amazingly in the movie is, like, we really got to take our time with so many things, but specifically when they danced together, and when, Ariana Grande spoke about how she's like, I didn't want to really learn that dance because I wanted to be following her. Like, I wanted to be in the moment of following her dance moves and her movement.
Yeah.
So that it would be like Glinda just like trying to be there for her in that way. And I think it does feel really, really like tender and soft, Glinda trying to make up for anything that she has done and kind of like lending Elphaba some social capital.
Yeah. So
that people aren't laughing at her in that way.
This was also like what you were talking about earlier with like letting things breathe. I think why I loved this so much is because it felt like in a movie where so much was happening left, right, and center, like nothing was happening except for two people just like staring at each other and like having this like intimate dance choreography. And it felt how I feel about my favorite moments in the musical when like nothing is happening but a single spotlight is on like one of these characters. And I really liked that it drowned out the noise of the rest of the scene that was happening around it, of the movie in general. And like I really think it will be one of these like movie pictures that will stick with me forever. So it's so interesting to say that and then to say what I'm about to say of a scene.
Well, can I say one more thing actually? I also like, there's also so much storytelling in that Oz's ballroom. You get there and the band is animals. Like with the movie,
which is not in the musical.
No. Because there's just like, they all look like Dr. Dillamond. It looks in the musical way look weird. In like, there's so much storytelling that's happening by you're going to this underground club, and what's underground? Oh, speaking animals. What is all the cool people are going to.
It's like an illegal club. It's like
exactly. It's like a speakeasy, and it's full of these talking animals. They're the ones who are the band, and everyone's intermingling. And when you're above the surface, there's very few talking animals. They're in hiding. They're behind closed doors. But this place that is the most swankified place in town, cut from the movie,
rude,
is full of culture, full of life, and full of these talking animals.
Yeah.
So yes, okay. Go on.
No, what I was going to say is that, like, that scene so beautifully bumped out, but then another scene that, again, no one else seems to really have problems with except for, like, us and I think, like, real musical lovers, Defying Gravity. I was crying in this song, but only towards, like, the end. I also feel so strongly that, like, the movie should end, like, 30 seconds earlier as soon as she is, like, giving us that full same stage picture that she does on stage. We should, like, cut right after that. Like, I don't care to see her fly again. I'm going to see her fly in the next movie. I don't need this, like, big cinematic moment. But they bumped out, like, what is it, like 14 minutes on the cast or on the soundtrack, the movie soundtrack or something like that.
There's a lot of dialogue.
It feels like 25 minutes in the movie.
And a lot of action sequences kind of chopping up Defying Gravity.
I mean, we didn't even get to my hottest take of this movie is that it feels like a superhero movie, and I mean that as a, like, not a compliment.
No, Yes, I mean, okay, we'll get there in a second because there's like full in-depth conversation to have there, but let's talk about Defying Gravity.
Okay, let me just like pull up here Defying Gravity. Oh, okay, so they did get rid of the dialogue. It's like 8 minutes on the soundtrack, but I think that
it's about 5 minutes on the original album. 5 minutes, I think, on.
And like they do. I don't want to say they break momentum in the musical, but they do like take their time with it for sure. I just feel like there was so much happening. Like, we're in a hot air balloon at one point. We are, like, flashing back to, like, young Elphaba with, like, a new unlimited motif that was added for this movie. And then we get the, like, battle cry flying and then Wicked Part 1. And I think, I mean, I won't speak for you, but I'm pretty sure your biggest problem was that the momentum felt completely broken.
Yeah, that was what scene. I felt. That's what we talked about, like, right after we got out. To me, I wasn't as emotional as I wanted to be because I need to kind of like be taken on a journey, and like not to say there wasn't a journey, but that song, you know, the build, and it feels almost like frantic, like you're running out of time, you don't have much time to get out of here, and it's such a powerful moment, and I wanted to like be able to like stay with Elphaba in that moment and have it all on her, and instead we're cutting to like soldiers like trying to get her out, which there are, and I think this is maybe one of the faults of a movie that is a strength of the stage, in that the stage picture, everything is happening at the same time,
yes,
in the same frame, and you gotta get to choose where you look, whereas in a movie everything's happening at the same time, but they cut to certain things at certain moments, so you lose a shot of certain characters at certain moments. So in these like really heightened emotional moments for Elphaba, I'm watching like guards run through the castle.
Yeah.
And the guards are there in Defying Gravity on stage, but Elphaba's also still there. And a lot of times this is a strength of movies in that, oh, you know, on stage you have to focus on one thing because we can't be like changing back and forth between sets. But in movies, you can kind of get multiple perspectives. But this was one of the moments where I was like, no, I want to stay on her journey, her emotional moment, and kind of watch her go through this thought process and this, like, you know, power moment with her. And I don't necessarily want to be cutting away to all these different things. And I really do understand the reasoning behind it and why they had this whole hot air balloon sequence, because they wanted it to feel like the finale of a movie, the ending of a movie. They built out this big action sequence so that it felt complete and full and whole, like a climax. But to me, sometimes it feels like, are you not trusting this song that has taken audiences out to intermission for 20 years, left people in tears, like I'm not someone who needs to be loyal all the time to everything. Like, I do think there is room to change, but that Defying Gravity moment is so emotionally powerful on stage, and I think they undercut what they had by doing, you know, so many different choices in that song.
I mean, I agree with you, but watch every single video online, and people are like, this is the greatest, like, 20 minutes I've ever seen.
I disagree.
Like, completely, like, weeping. And again, like, I was crying too, but I think just because, like, I knew where we were in the story. Like, as soon as we got the, like, I hope you're happy, I'm like, okay, here we are. Like, I've been waiting for this the entire movie. What is this going to look like? What is this going to sound like? I was just, like, emotional in general at that point.
Then we're cutting to freaking Bach. I don't want to see Bach.
Well, that's the thing. Like, we cut back to Shiz at one point, and like,
and you've got Fierro on the stairs,
is looking around. It's because, like, but again, like, to your point, I didn't even think about it that way, but like, you're absolutely right in that this all happens in the musical, not Bach and Fierro, but like, there is a moment in the musical when like Madame Morble comes out on this like lift, and she makes that announcement of like this repulsion, this wicked witch, but we're seeing Elphaba.
We're still with Elphaba. This is all background noise, but to me, when I'm watching it, I'm still with her. She's flying. She's in the air.
Yeah.
I think... And maybe there's something to... Not to interrupt, but I do think there's something to the practical effect of her and the cherry picker versus
100%. That will be the greatest trick I've ever seen,
broom.
And it's not even a good trick.
No. There's something so emotional about her getting in that cherry picker and going up, like, lose it every time. It's silly. I will remember once my brother was in a very bootleg production of Wicked. He played Dr. Dillamond, obviously, one of his greatest performances in The Mask. And so these are like 10 to 13-year-olds putting on a production of Wicked. And when that 10-year-old girl stood on
a chair?
A ladder. Stood on a ladder.
Oh, a ladder.
And everyone behind her was like, they like closed the curtains halfway and then they're like billowing the like black fabric behind her. I'm crying. I'm like, not this.
No, I know. It's like to me, which is what I was saying about the Ozda scene. It's like the simple moments are the ones that like get you. And I think like my main problems with this number in general, like as you said, the broken outness of it is like momentum losing. Anytime we were with Elphaba, it was so dark. I could not even see her. Like it was so dark when we were in the bottom, when they like locked themselves in that room
like
before
the tower.
like so dark. And then like I just really did not enjoy the like Avengers of it all when like she gets the cape, she becomes the full witch, we get the freaking slow-mo. Like I don't need that. I don't need it. And then she like falls out of the window, whatever. I did like the callback to like her younger self. I thought that was when like I started to get emotional. But then again, like they give us this like beautiful stage picture that we all know and love, but then they ruin it by having her like fly even more. And it's like, no, you did what I asked for. Now just end it. Like just, it's over. Like we get it. She's flying. Like I get that. But yeah, I think it is like what we feel about it is exactly like what you're saying of, I don't need to see the zoomed in. I like the full picture as is. But I understand why they did it that way. Like,
no,
obviously it's very cinematic to do it that way.
And this is why it's almost even hard to critique, because when you're seeing the same story told through, because this movie is so loyal to the musical.
Yeah,
it's
the loyalest movie musical I've ever seen.
It's crazy. And I think, again, part 2 will be a little less loyal, which is fine, because Act 2 is just not as good. Like,
but like movie, there's not that much story.
No, there's not enough. This movie is so loyal, but I do think it highlights like the strengths and weaknesses of musicals, like stage musicals, and the strengths and weaknesses of a movie musical, and what you're able to do in certain moments. And I don't even necessarily know if, like, obviously I wish, like, me as a director, I would have made different choices here, I think, but I can't even blame, because when you're fitting something into this well-established genre of movie, there are certain things that like you have to do for success. I don't know, especially if you're making this like big blockbuster movie. So I'm not even like faulting them. It's just like this is a weakness of the movie making genre, and then there are other weaknesses of the musical genre that are also called into light, and it kind of just like is what it is in some ways.
Yeah, because it's even that, like, because the wizard is also here with the, like, guards sees her, right? But,
kill
like,
her.
Again, a lyric change. Very
kill
dark.
Her.
Also, like, the monkeys become so, like, superhero-y villain in that moment, too. But, like, you see the head, like, come forward in the musical, and then it's like, oh, my God, where did it go? Because now it's behind her because she's flying. There's, like, again, as you said, like, a very... like simple stage trick is like one of the best tricks I've ever seen ever, and I can instantly burst into tears, but like it just didn't feel the same here.
When she starts going up on that cherry picker,
it's me.
over for me.
Yeah.
It's over.
This is also another one where like for me the like vocal choices, the stylistic choices, like a little too much in this one, but it fits the vibe of like the cinematic universe that they're trying to create.
It's bigger.
Yeah. And then I think that perfectly leads us into my absolute main critique of this movie is the color.
Everyone's critique, honestly.
Yeah.
The internet's crazy about this color.
It is so dull looking to me, and the only thing that I will compare it to, and the only thing I will ever compare it to, is The Wizard of Oz, because that is the same world, and that is the most technicolor, beautiful, bright set I've ever seen, and it was made 100 years ago. Like, it's just crazy to me that a movie like Wicked that really focused on having such practical sets looks so dull. I saw something recently, I almost sent it to you, but I was like, no, I'm going to talk about it here. Someone was talking about the costuming, which we briefly talked about, like the shade of pink that Ariana is wearing. To me, it really washes her out. And someone was pulled up her color chart, and they were like, she should be wearing like brighter, more coral. You talked about off the mic, like her dancing with.
I love the Dancing Through Life dress.
Dancing Through Life dress. Which is like bright, and there's orange in it, and it's like hot pink. Even in Popular, like Popular had this beautiful like pink glow to the like entire look of it, and everything else just felt so not Oz to me. And I'm so sorry, Jon Chu, but to say that like,
I know we haven't even invoked Jon Chu's name yet, so like let's go Jon Chu.
To say that the reason that it looks like this is because Oz is finally a real place. Oz is fake. Sorry, it always has been, always will be. To say that like you can now touch and feel the Emerald City, you could have done that in the Wizard of Oz too, and it looked different. And also to say that like the world hasn't been colored by Elphaba's green yet, so things will look different. I'm like, no, you're saying that because you're getting this critique, so you're calling your editor right now and saying, hey, bump up the saturation for part 2. Like, I don't buy it.
My question is like, did we find, let's say if that's what he's saying, did we find the first scene, which takes place at the end of the full story, more saturated, let's say, than the parts at Shiz? I don't really feel like we did.
Like, maybe a little bit, but only because, like, the Yellow Brick Road is there, whereas Shiz is very,
the
like,
tulips
navy.
And the...
Yeah, like,
Ariana's still in, like, a pale pink. Someone's like, she's not wearing enough blush. I'm like, I'm with you. I'm a blush lover. I love
even
blush.
A lip, I think, could have been a little more, like, stained.
I am also going to talk about a tweet or a TikTok that I saw, and I don't remember who it was.
And her hair color, sorry, the hair color also washes her out.
It washes her out a bit. I don't know who did this TikTok, but I'm gonna steal her thoughts for this, and this is in defense of the colors Ariana's wearing. She's not wearing hot pinks all the time because she wants to be taken seriously a little bit. Like, so she's in these like more muted for her colors. She's like not like over the top in blush. She's still got a lash on, obviously, but she's not over the top in like blush or hot pink when she's at school because she doesn't want to be seen as frivolous. She wants to be seen as a bit more serious. And like, I get that read. I'm with that read. To be honest, like, she was fine to me. Like, not even like her look. I don't know. To me, the coloring that bothered me was mostly like Shiz and the extreme backlighting at all times. Why are we always backlit?
It's
like, killing me.
I'm Not That Girl number, it's pitch black. Like, I don't know what we were doing. We're in this like magical forest, and I'm just like, give me Avatar, don't give me this. I think like I will reference the critique that I gave right after we left, and I think this is my critique for just like movies in general these days. Like, everything feels like it has like a gloss on it. It's almost like you're watching through like a Vaseline kind of lens. And to me, I wanted like less Marvel, more Harry Potter. Like, there is something so like charming about the way that those seven movies look. Eight part 2. When you see Hogwarts for the first time in the first movie, when you enter the Great Hall, it is so warm and inviting and like beautiful. And I never felt once at Shiz like that.
It felt like it like in Harry Potter, in Hogwarts, it felt like it had been there for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And these sets felt like they were brand new, which they were, but I don't want them. I want to feel like this is an established school that has been churning out students for years and years and years, and instead everything felt quite new to me in this school.
Even a newer movie, still like not new, but I think did a much better job coloring than this one. Like The Hunger Games, like the Capitol feels so grand and so amazing, and that's what I wanted the Emerald City to feel like. Like, when we enter One Short Day, there's a moment like that line when she says like it's all grand and it's all green. We're not even looking at anything green at that time. Like, I also just don't think that like, look at this poster. Look how green Elphaba is. She's not that green in the movie. And it's just like, what a choice to bump down like your saturation for something that is based on the most colorful, a movie that brought color for the very first time. Like, it should.
I don't know if it was the first color movie, but it is kind of like the most famous. I don't think so.
We were talking about this at work the other day, but I can't remember if it was whatever. Like, regardless, like when they go when they go from the black and white into the color world, it is so beautiful. It is so grand. Like, the red and the blue that Dorothy wears.
Technology. That Technicolor technology is crazy, and I miss it. I miss it every day.
Yeah, like, we were sending pictures back and forth to each other the other week of just, like, posters from The Wizard of Oz and how stunning that movie looked. So, I just, like, that really, like, bothered me a lot, is how this movie looked. Because even the musical, which has not that many sets, they have, like, incredible set pieces, but, like, when we're at Shiz, we're not, like, seeing a whole, like, school set. But that
there's, like, a statue, sort of, that they give, like, for, like, the courtyard of Shiz.
But, like, that musical feels so warm. Like, Fiero's wearing red. He's wearing navy in this movie. Like, even to that One Short Day moment, like, Glinda's wearing yellow. Like, she's not wearing yellow at all in this movie. Yellow is so warm and bright and beautiful. I know, she's in pink this entire movie. And we've seen kind of, like, leaked set photos of her in, like, a blue dress. I wonder if we'll see her in yellow or not. We saw Ariana in yellow, kind of One Short Day inspired at one of the premieres. My favorite look. She looked incredible.
They both looked so good. Like, very One Short Day with the glasses.
My favorite. Good. They should have brought the glasses into the movie.
I know. Well,
we got the Wizardmania guys, though, so that's all that matters.
Oh, my God, the cameo. What about the cameo?
I know, the cameo. That's
the Adina Kristen cameo.
Yeah. That was, like... I've never felt any way about One Short Day until this movie.
Oh, really? I love One Short Day. One Short Day.
I don't know. I feel like some of the on-set pictures that we saw as a deep leak on Twitter looked brighter than this. So
it's frustrating because we know they spent so much money and so much time.
They planted 9 million tulips.
Like, they planted 9 million tulips. So much labor building these huge practical sets. And yet, when I left... I felt they didn't look real, but I know that they're real, and the way it was lit and the way it was shot didn't like honor the technical work that was put in to this movie. and like, it's upsetting to me.
Sorry to the editors, like, sorry to the cinematographers, and also, like, we talked about this, that what doesn't help what we're talking about is the CGI animals. That does not help the way that things don't look real, even though they're real.
By integrating more animals in, like someone like Dulcie Bear, Dr. Like, there's... To make them look more real, you have to make everything else look more fake, almost. And I do think that impacted as well.
Even that first scene when we go into the, like, she had a mother, she had a father, as so many do. So dark. Like, the most backlit scene I've ever seen in my life.
It's always backlit. Everything's backlit. This is actually something interesting. Like, thinking of that first scene, and this is not really to do with the movie, this is to do with the musical in general, but something that, like... Wow, there's so many directions to take this. There's so many things to talk about. I can't even go on.
I know. At an hour 30 in, I feel like there's still so much to say, but also...
I know. I kind of have maybe, like, this is, like, a short one, and then I maybe, like, one more, like, longer thing for me, but let's go.
Yeah.
Thinking about that first scene, after having read kind of the first chunk of this book, where you spend a lot of time with Elphaba's mother. Elphaba is a child growing up. Her sister, they have a brother. And kind of, like, their whole family situation.
How old is the brother? In between?
He's, like... No, he's the baby. He's young.
So she didn't die after she gave birth to Nessa?
No. It's very different. But something that they maintain... So, Elphaba, in the musical, has this, like, green vial.
Yes,
that,
the elixir.
Exactly. Glinda's like, what is this? She's like, it belonged to my mother. And it becomes, like, a memory, like a token that Elphaba keeps close to her to remember her mother. And then, spoiler, pause if you don't know, I don't know, we find out that this bottle, this green elixir, was from the wizard, and the Wizard of Oz is Elphaba's father.
Not to interrupt you, but to interrupt you for a second, if anybody watched that movie and did not say, "Oh my God, that's Jeff Goldblum
that sounds
singing,"
like Jeff Goldblum.
Like, that was like, change his voice slightly if you want to reveal moment, because it sounded.
It's far enough away.
So
it's
much.
Fine, I think.
As soon as that character opened its mouth, I was like, okay, well, we're giving it away right now.
Well, it's meant to be somewhat obvious, I guess. But in this book, like, that vial is something that the wizard, like, gave to Elphaba's mom to, like, rape her.
I figured.
And, no, like yes, but the way that it's changed from, like, this kind of really sinister object in the book to this like
have an
memory like like the way that they took everything in here and we're just gonna sanitize it in a million ways and take out everything that's like ugly and dark about the world that was created here is so interesting to me.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But yeah, I don't know, just something interesting. And like I do think this is like, you know, the YAification of Wicked. I think this is a movie for, I mean, it's for everyone, obviously it's for us, but I do think it's like specifically for, let's say, like a young adult audience, school age like people. I think that's like the overall audience, if it wasn't already this like huge property that everyone knew. Like I do think that is the goal, but so bizarre to kind of like take this like very dark book and make it into this like not fantasy. Very dark fantasy story. Okay, yeah, that was a tangent that like needed to be said.
And what's your other tangent? Go for it.
My other tangent, I think we do need to talk about Jon Chu because like this movie has been in talks for years and years and years. And when it was announced Jon Chu was directing this movie, I'm like, oh, it's happening. Because that man makes things happen. Like, if you sign him onto something, he's like, we're moving, let's put this into action. You know, he's not having things languish in development for years and years and years. He does work. And this is the prop that I left to get earlier. I have to like out myself as a Jon Chu stan because here is my DVD of The Legion of Extraordinary Dancers, a web series that Jon Chu created and developed.
Like,
and
why
I think
is
it's
this
really,
even on DVD though?
This is such a good question. So basically, I saw it on Much Music, which is like basically the Canadian MTV years ago, probably 10 years ago when it aired. And I was obsessed with it. It's a web series, so the episodes are 10-ish minutes, some longer, some shorter. And they just aired the first full season on TV one afternoon as a movie. And I became obsessed. I was stalking on YouTube. So then for Christmas that year, my parents got me the DVD of seasons 1 and 2 of this web series. Where did they find this? Like, I was so obsessed. Like, that's the love here. And I do think it's interesting because Jon Chu directed, like, conceived of this. The choreographer is Christopher Scott, who's the choreographer of the Wicked movie. The cinematographer is Alice Brooks, who's the cinematographer of the Wicked movie.
Yeah.
And so Jon Chu has been working with these same people for years and years and years. He's like extremely loyal. We also know he's done, you know, Step Up 2, Step Up 3D, Crazy Rich Asians. He did In the Heights, which we did talk about as well. And I know we kind of had like also maybe a dissenting opinion from what the public.
But what I will say is the coloring of In the Heights is amazing. Like, it's so warm in comparison.
I think better, but I also find it a little pale, if that makes sense.
And maybe it's just like I don't like the way that movies look these days. Maybe it's that.
I know, it is frustrating. It is big budget movies have this look, and
but Crazy Rich Asians didn't feel so pale to me.
Crazy Rich Asians, I agree, felt colorful.
Yeah.
And like when you're immersed in that world,
the wedding sequence
of like luxury, the wedding, the like one picture we have of Ariana
at the wedding
as Linda in the wedding like looks like the wedding in Crazy Rich Asians,
just like Vaseline over. Yeah.
Yes. No, the Crazy Rich Asians had that color and had that opulence that I kind of was missing from this movie. All it had was Michelle Yeoh, you know, who I love.
Yeah.
So like I have to at myself as a Jon Chu stan, as a Christopher Scott stan as well, like really, really amazing work. And like I needed to bring this prop out to like prove my standum. But yes, like I think like the frustration. So I love what Jon Chu was able to do here and like able to make this movie. And like a conversation we had after we saw it was, is this potentially the best version we were ever going to get of this movie? And in some ways I feel like yes. Even though we have critiques, I have issues with it. I also feel like, could it be better? I don't know.
I mean, to call back to what you said, like literally as it ended of like, it's exactly what you thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. But also like, we have these things, but you just kept saying like, but it's not bad. Like, it's actually really good. Yeah. It's just like, it's so
our
hard.
Emotions are so tied to our emotions are so tied to this story, to this movie. You have like 20 years of history, of backstory and like this movie is almost been, like,
because
sitting
of the
in our
Wizard
hearts.
of Oz, right? Like,
but yes, like there's so much like these characters, this movie, this story has like been sitting like in our hearts for years and years and years, and then for it to be real, how can it not be disappointing in some way? How can it not not live up to the perfect one in my mind.
Like, that's the thing, like, I don't want to say that, like, I walked in with high expectations, because I actually feel like I walked in with very low expectations, because I thought it was going to be, like, the worst, just because,
and it wasn't.
No, it's not. I just think that, like, nothing will ever, and I mean this, like, in a compliment to all properties here, but, like, nothing will ever top the stage show for me, ever. And I just think that, like, me specifically, like, I'm reaching for things that don't exist. They gave me everything that I asked for, and it's still not enough. And, like, that's a me problem.
Will it ever be? Will it ever be enough? And this is, I think, also why we've spent the past 6 years / our entire lives devoted to talking about musicals, because there is something about a musical on stage that cannot be captured in any other medium. And that's why we're here.
And also, not to turn this into a PSA right now, but, like, live theater is, like, struggling again. So, like, get yourselves into a theater, because nothing will ever make you feel the way that, like, a live show can capture, like, these moments. Although I say all of this, but then I am going to reference, like, the movie musical of all time for me currently, which is, like, Tick, Tick, Boom. Like,
Tick, Tick, Boom. With the same cinematographer, Alex Brooks. And I think that movie's beautiful. I think that movie looks amazing.
It feels so different. I think because it is so slow and so, like, not fantastical.
Yeah, it's very different. It's so different. It's so different. And also, we didn't have as much of a relationship with that property before seeing the movie the way we did with Wicked.
100%. Like, again, also, as I just said, like, this movie could have been, like, it is everything and more, and it's still not up to the standard that I wanted.
Sorry, I can't. It's not winning Best Picture. I also do think, like, not to talk about Tick, Tick, Boom again, but I also do think, unfortunately, Lin-Manuel Miranda has the juice. Like, he has it. He has it. And, like, Jon Chu, as much as I have a fan, like, sometimes I'm like, does he have it? I don't know. I think
it would be really interesting to watch these two movies together to see, like, how they become, like, one story, one fluid story by the end of this. But unfortunately, we have to wait a year for that. So before we, like, actually wrap this up, what are you hoping to see in part 2 that might not be
what
in
a
the
good
musical?
question. What am I hoping to see in part 2? I think I want to see more of Elphaba kind of, like, leading this rebellion or working with kind of the resistance against the wizard, the government, working with the animals. I want to see the animals again more in part 2 and see Elphaba, like, aligned with them, and, like, what action is she taking, because I feel like we just hear about it in Act 2 of Wicked, and I want to see kind of that backstory. I want to see what action she's taking.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you
I completely agree. I think they've really set us up here for more of an animal storyline. I think about that, like, obviously the first scene with, like, Dulcie Bear as her nanny, the person that, like, loved her the most out of everyone in her family, all the way cut to when she has this, like, figures out that she has these, like, powerful moments at Shiz for the first time, when she breaks a sculpture and the wizard statue, like, falls down, and it's revealed that all of these animals are there, like
being covered up. That was really good. Really good.
The, like, secret meetings that Dr. Dilliman has with all of the other animals, all the way until these, like, flashback scenes. There's a moment, like, when Elphaba sees Dr. Dilliman in a cage, and I'm like, what was that? She has this, like, illusion.
Like a vision. Almost like a prophecy.
Yeah, like, literally that. So, like, are we gonna see Dr. Dilliman again in the second part? Because, like, we really don't see him in the second half of the musical. Again,
I want him to be back.
Like, something that I've seen online, which I think would be really interesting and really, like, propel the evilness of Nessa. Obviously, Nessa knows how much Elphaba loves the animals, but does Nessa love the animals as much as her sister does? I think
or is she someone who will, like, be swayed by what is most convenient and what gives her power?
Yeah, I think it will be really interesting when Nessa becomes the governor of Munchkinland. Like, is she gonna have Dulcie Bear, like, in a cage, not able to speak? Because I think that would destroy Elphaba.
Seems to be.
That's kind of, like, the main theory that's, like, circling around here. And, like, if they didn't put it in the movie that they filmed 2 years ago, like, are they going to kick themselves that people
like,
want to see that? Maybe.
We can do it.
But what I really hope we see in part 2 is better color.
Voiced
That's
by
really what I
Sharon
hope.
D. Clarke. Sorry, not to say. Voiced by Sharon D. Clarke, Dulcie Bear.
Yeah. I hope that they've listened to the critiques a little bit because they have the power to bump up the saturation. So I hope we do. And I hope that what he said in his interview with a journalist from Toronto that's going viral is that the world is colored by Elphaba. I hope that's true. I hope that that is actually what happens in part 2 and not something that he just said to like quiet the noise of all of us complaining about the color. I don't know that I care to see enough about The Wizard of Oz more than we see in the musical, but I think it could be really interesting to bring these characters like into play. I
just have like 5 more things to talk about, but like we can't.
I know we can't.
We gotta end this. We gotta end this.
Yeah.
Comment. I'll discuss in the comments.
Yeah, like it's just like it's crazy as we've said all the way through here that like this is out now. I believe I saw yesterday that it will be on streaming in like February or March.
Keep it in theaters, like
I know, keep it in theaters, but also
this
like
has great rewatchability.
I'm curious to see. I'm curious to watch it at home eventually to see what it looks like and what it sounds like because this is a movie that should be seen in a theater as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Are we gonna rate this?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm having a hard
I actually
time
like don't think I have
do.
a rating at this current. You know what we'll do?
Okay.
Like hold us accountable, but like when part 2 comes out, we'll do a full thing. That, in a roundabout way, is our thoughts on Wicked Part 1. We will be here next year this time for Wicked Part 2. We will check in February after the Golden Globes because that will actually have some real like Wicked contention happening there. So we will be talking about Wicked, I'm sure, all next year too, leading up to part 2 of the Wicked movie. We have like a couple episodes left for this year. Whenever this comes out, we might only have one left. Depends on how we're doing things, but we are on a week-to-week basis right now to finish the year. Our final episode will be our 150th, which is crazy. And then we'll talk about it later in that episode, but we will be taking January off again, and then we'll be back in February for our Way Too Early Tony nominations. So until then, you can go back and listen to any of our other episodes by subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a comment. Steph responds to all the comments on YouTube, so don't forget to
It might take me a few weeks, but I respond to all comments.
Yes, and thank you for sending them because we love when we see a paragraph or a couple on YouTube. Like it's really nice when people
I want to hear what other people are thinking because we're just kind of sometimes I feel like our opinions are so similar just because we're like always together.
Yeah.
So I want to hear what other people
say.
Like the person who hated Sunset Boulevard. Not hated, but, you know, had a different opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can follow us on Twitter/X and Instagram at Off to B-Way Podcast and on TikTok at Off to Broadway. And yeah, leave us a comment.
If TikTok is even still around next year,
we'll see what happens.
Well, we can't talk about this now.
We're from Canada, so I don't know exactly what's going to happen here, but yeah.
Yeah. But until then, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.